from you, Mark.
Invincible Season 3 is very different from the first two seasons, but it's equally good in terms of storyline. In fact, it feels more like the Invincible version of Captain America Civil War, with a hint of Batman vs. Superman. There's no overarching bad guy like Omni-Man or Angstrom Levy, and there's just so many interesting things that have happened in the first 3 episodes that just released. In this video, I'll break down all 3 episodes for you, and while doing that, I'll try to analyze the various nuances and unanswered questions you may have in your mind. If you haven't watched the show yet, be prepared for some of the juiciest spoilers. So without further ado, let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Episode 1. 3 revived heroes, 1 back-in-form villain, and many moral questions. Episode 1 of Invincible Season 3 opens with Mark pushing his powers to new heights, while Rex simmers with jealousy. What made me happy is that the jokes in the show still land right where they were supposed to. Yes, the darker undertones of the story are always persistent, like one of those umbrella organizations like Weyland-Yutani, but that doesn't stop the humor. Anyway, Cecil and Donald admire Mark's progress, but they also know that he has nearly limitless potential and can do wondrous things. During a discussion about the Global Defense Agency's effectiveness, they receive an urgent report about a break-in at the National Archives building. Oh, and from now on, we'll address the Global Defense Agency as GDA. Coming back, a mole inside the agency tips off Multipol, Duplicate's brother, that Rex and Mark are on their way. At the archives, Mark and Rex encounter minor crooks, Dropkick and Fightmaster, who aim to steal the Declaration of Independence. Rex and Mark treat them like pushovers and chat about Mark's troubles dating Eve. Oh, and they were fighting the 2 crooks the whole time. However, Multipol arrives at the scene and uses Invincible and Rex's arrogance against them. He ambushes Rex and injures him. Mark, still rattled by his clash with Angstrom, Mark committed a murder and did not want to repeat it, tries to negotiate but loses when Multipol won't back down. Enraged, Mark wipes out every copy of Multipol. It seems no matter what, Omni-Man's children do have a habit of losing control. You'll know why I say children in just a bit. Anyway, Duplicate, who was supposed to be dead, and whose death Multipol was trying to avenge, arrives at the scene with Immortal to stop the carnage. Duplicate reveals she's alive, and this gives Mark long enough for him to subdue the remaining Multipol duplicates, instead of killing them. Unfortunately, Multipol's attack clears the way for Dropkick and Fightmaster to flee with the Declaration of Independence. Mark returns home, where April, the GDA's caretaker assigned for Oliver, and Debbie reveal that Oliver's intelligence is skyrocketing. He also witnesses Oliver's emerging powers, which both impress and worry him, because when Mark got his powers, he was 17. He understood what those powers meant, and he had lived a regular childhood, which we all know is very important for superheroes. Meanwhile, Rex summons Duplicate and Immortal to the Guardians of the Globe HQ, shocking Rudy aka Robot, Amanda aka Monster Girl, Bulletproof, and Shapesmith. Duplicate explains she faked her death to cope with the trauma from the Lizard League incident, and used the downtime to get engaged to Immortal. Black Samson announces that Shrinking Ray has recovered, so yeah, Season 2 only joked when it hinted that the 3 superheroes were dead. Elsewhere, Donald alerts Cecil to unusual seismic activity across North America, even though Doc Seismic is still locked up. Cecil brushes this off until he notices Oliver flying. Oh yeah, he'd been monitoring the family since forever. Debbie expresses her concern about Oliver's rapid growth, and Mark reassures her that Oliver promised no more surprises. But you know what? Oliver overhears this and silently disagrees. Needless to say, Cecil arrives almost as soon as he learns about Oliver's powers and finds out that the kid was super eager to get recruited as the GDA's next weapon against possible Viltrumite threats. Debbie opposes Cecil's plan, and the two of them have a heated argument over whether Oliver belongs under GDA control. Mark steps away to visit William and Rick, who remains traumatized by Sinclair's Reanimin program. They urge Mark to ask Eve out, and advise him to withhold details about his recent run-in with a depressed alternate version of her. Mark obliges and awkwardly invites Eve on a date. I love the voice casting for nailing this scene, you know? Stephen Yeun and Gillian Jacobs really made the conversation authentic and emotional, as Mark and Samantha. She agrees at first, but grows angry when Mark mentions Alt Eve, the older version of Samantha from the future, who was still hung up on her world's Mark. Those disputes fade into the background when Donald informs them that Doc Seismic has abducted nearly every superhero in North America. Doc Seismic wasn't just loafing in his cell, he had tapped into every superhero frequency and forged an alliance with subterranean creatures. When he finally struck, he surprised everyone and locked them up, intending to kill them all. Invincible and Adam Eve rushed in to save the day, though Oliver wanted to join them. Debbie stopped him, fearing he wasn't ready. Unfortunately, Doc Seismic's insect friends outmatched Invincible and Eve. Cecil had to send in the GDA-approved Reanimans, along with Darkwing 2, to shift the battle in the hero's favor. Mark was horrified when he learned Cecil had hired Sinclair, the man who caused Rick's PTSD, and Darkwing 2, who has blood on his hands. Even though these additions helped defeat Doc Seismic, Mark hated that the good guys had to rely on criminals to secure a win. Even the others tried to calm Mark. They urged him to consider the big picture and trust Cecil's strategy. Mark refused and barged into the Pentagon, demanding answers. His anger pushed Cecil to a breaking point, so Cecil and a squad of Reanimans cornered Mark in a strange high-tech room that resembled the Danger Room from X-Men. Mark, caught off guard, found himself at the mercy of Cecil's contingency plan. Meanwhile, during the mid-credit scene, Alan tried to persuade Nolan to break out, hoping they could escape the Viltrumites' appalling meals and half-hearted torture. Nolan, however, insisted on staying put. He believed he deserved punishment for his actions and saw no reason to flee. Episode 2, Cecil's Past and Mark Goes Solo. The second episode starts with a flashback that explains how Cecil got his famous scar. Many years ago, a younger Cecil confronted two fanatics from a cult called the Order of the Freeing Fist, who planned to kill most of the city by unleashing a toxic gas that melted your skin and organs to give you a long and agonizing death. Cecil was young and skilled. He fights them bravely despite taking a beating, and does his best to contain the gas until GDA agents arrive. However, he gets exposed to the gas, and the worst happens. Had he stayed there any longer, he would have lost his life. Fortunately, he survives thanks to extensive reconstructive surgery, but he insists on keeping a scar on his face to remind himself that innocent lives were lost on his watch. Director Radcliffe tries to comfort him by mentioning that his actions saved countless people, but Cecil still blames himself for every death. I think this was a pretty interesting backstory, you know. It shows that Cecil was someone who really cared about people, and the tragic incident didn't make him waver from his cause and his purpose in life. However, he was not entirely against doing whatever it took to get the job done to save people. A few days later, Cecil rescues Radcliffe from an ambush by Komodo Dragon of the Lizard League. To his shock, the same couple from the Order of the Freeing Fist had come to help. Oh, and I must note that they had seemingly died when they sacrificed themselves to that toxic green substance. Radcliffe explains that the GDA has hired them, and he really believed that they had changed, and they've been fixed of all their villainy and evil. However, Cecil can't accept that the agency he serves would recruit murderers, so he shoots them in cold blood. You see, this is fairly in contrast with his outlook towards the Reaniman, who he uses to protect himself later in the episode. Anyway, since he killed the couple, Cecil is locked up in a GDA prison for superpowered criminals. Over the course of 3 years, Cecil transforms that prison from an Arkham Asylum knockoff to a peaceful, organized place. Radcliffe then reveals that this was all part of a test. By accomplishing the impossible, Cecil proves he's worthy to become Radcliffe's successor as the GDA director. We cut to the present, where Cecil corners Mark in a high-tech construct room. Mark refuses to believe criminals can reform, something that our guy Cecil was a fan of. So Mark attacks the Reanimans that Cecil unleashes. When Mark refuses to stand down, Cecil activates a device in Mark's brain. The sound drills into his brain, leaving him helpless. Needless to say, Mark sees this as evil, while Cecil sees it as a necessary measure against beings with godlike powers, especially after what his father did previously. What's the saying? One man's tool is another man's weapon? Mark flees to the Guardians of the Globe HQ to warn everyone, but Cecil and the Reanimans are right behind him. Another fight breaks out. Mark finally leaves the Guardians and warns Cecil that he won't hesitate to kill him if he ever targets Mark's family again. Meanwhile, Debbie, Oliver, Mark, and Eve all meet at Mark's place. Here, Oliver shows his murderous tendencies for the first time, and he says that Cecil should have been killed. Debbie and Mark obviously berate him and explain that taking a life is never the solution. Though Oliver agrees to back down, it's unclear if he truly grasps the moral weight of murder. Meanwhile, the Guardians split down the middle. Amanda, Rex, Shrinking Ray, Rudy, and Bulletproof quit the GDA, while Shapesmith, Black Samson, Immortal, and Duplicate choose to stay. Cecil promises the loyal members continued support from the Reanimans, and formally welcomes Darkwing 2 into the fold. Donald quietly warns that this path could end badly, but Cecil insists the GDA must adapt and blur moral lines if they want to protect Earth from threats like Nolan. We jump to another flashback of Cecil's first encounter with Nolan, who claimed he was Earth's defender and had been sent by his government to help Earth. Episode 3. Oliver is just like his father, but that's not the only problem. This one begins without a dialogue and explores Tether Tyrant and Mag Maniac's rather tragic past. They botch a bank robbery after Tether Tyrant spots a terrified child. Bulletproof arrives to stop them, and the close call makes the duo rethink their criminal lifestyle. They take jobs at a local diner, hoping for an honest path. Those plans go to hell when they lose their jobs and their apartment, which forces them back onto the streets. The guys tried their best, but the realities of the world brought them right where they had left things. Desperation drives them to another heist. Invincible responds and subdues them, but Oliver suddenly appears to lend a hand. Mark had agreed to begin his training and allows him to watch as the fight unfolds, but only from a distance. However, Oliver totally ignored the instructions. Mark scolds Oliver for rushing into danger, and Debbie says the same. She wants Oliver to learn discipline before he fights supervillains. Interestingly, Mark sees and understands Oliver's passion though. He decides it's better to guide the boy than to leave him to figure out his powers on his own. Meanwhile, Titan, the new kingpin of the city, faces the heat from Mr. Leo over Multipol's imprisonment. Titan initially refuses to assist with a jailbreak, but he finally agrees to do it this one time. Mark then gives Oliver some flight lessons. They visit Art's workshop for Oliver's first supersuit. Art also updates Mark's suit. The O on Oliver's chest is awkward because it looks like Omni-Man's emblem. Oliver doesn't see the problem, but Mark remembers how Nolan once terrified Earth before settling on Thraxa as its ruler. Mark tries to impress upon Oliver how much damage Omni-Man caused. Their lesson ends abruptly when Furnace and Kursk mount an assault on the GDA's penitentiary to free Multipol. Mark wants Oliver to watch from a distance, but Oliver ignores him after seeing innocent people get hurt. Mark scolds Oliver again for disobeying him, though the young boy believes he's doing the right thing. Later, the Mauler twins attack a US military defense site and fire a deadly missile, overwhelming the Guardians and forcing Mark back into action. Oliver also flies in to help, convinced that his powers are needed. In the chaos, Oliver crosses a line by killing the Mauler twins. In fact, the first one could have been an accident, but the second one actually surrendered before Oliver killed him in cold blood. He believes it's a necessary step, but Mark is clearly horrified. Cecil arrives as well. Oliver sees Mark's aggression and interprets it as a sign that force solves problems. Later, Mark tries to explain why killing is never a casual choice. Oliver counters by saying their father might have had a point when he slaughtered people whose ideals clashed with his. Now, Mark knows that this is troublesome. It's almost as if Oliver was going to become the next Omni-Man. The only way through is patience. He will have to use empathy if he wants to steer his brother away from Omni-Man's darker tendencies. Debbie also tried to remind her alien son that taking a single life can set even the noblest hero down a dark road. Oliver says he understands, though Mark and Debbie remain uncertain about his sincerity. The kid has already lied in the past about this stuff, so they are wise to remain concerned and wary. However, to the viewer, it's more than clear that Oliver still admires his father's ruthlessness. The family moment breaks when Mark notices a small drone hovering near the window. It self-destructs the instant he grabs it. The mid-credits teaser doesn't show the observer's face, but we know it was Angstrom, back from the dead. Mark believes that he killed Angstrom the last time they fought, and that incident has been haunting him for the longest time. However, the show has proven that seemingly fatal injuries don't always stick. Shrinking Ray, Rexplode, and even Cecil himself have recovered from close calls that should have ended them. If Angstrom found a way to rebuild his body, he might pose a serious threat. So yeah, it's pretty clear that Angstrom will be one of the major threats in the show. But there remain several unanswered questions, like the role of Alan the alien and his bulked up body. Then there's Nolan, who might end up coming back to Earth after a change of heart. It's even possible that he ends up fighting Oliver, who seems to be more powerful than Mark. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait it out and see what happens next. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.